fair.
Trevor Sikkema is a Pro Football Focus lead draft analyst and co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. So he's in control of the big board there for the draft. But before we get to that, Trevor, thanks for joining us. Let me start with the team that impressed you the most this past week.
I really enjoyed the moves that the Houston Texans have made. Obviously, you go get a quarterback like CJ Stroud last year, he hits the ground running and absolutely explodes. And what I love about what the Texans are doing is they're seeing that and they're not saying, all right, cool, we're ahead of schedule a little bit. This is good. They're all in. Like, they're ready for this. They say, we've got a quarterback who's playing hot. Let's get the rest of the team ready around him. So love what they did with some of the offensive moves last year. Defensive-centric free agency. I specifically love, okay, they probably thought they were going to lose Jonathan Grenard. They do. They go out and get Danielle Hunter. And then they also go out and get the Nico Autry. So, man, it's just like boom, boom, all these moves on the defensive side of the ball. It gives them the chance to be super flexible with what they're going to do in the NFL draft. Now, we just saw that trade happen with them and the Minnesota Vikings, so it gets a little bit interesting now what they're going to do. But I still think that it's wide receiver, maybe helping out the offensive line still, but from what they have done just as a whole plan of how you attack this offseason, I love that they have put their foot on the gas. And the Danielle Hunter signing especially said to me, this team is going all in, and I love it.
And it also helps that you have CJ Stroud on that rookie deal, so you can spread the wealth for a couple of years. What do you make of what the Vikings did, that they now have 2 first-round picks, 11 and 23? What do you think they're up to?
Oh, I think that they're eyeing a trade up big time. I mean, even before this week, we felt like Minnesota was going to be a team that was going to be eyeing trading up, right? They were kind of in that realm. There was rumors that, yeah, they're still on Kirk Cousins. I'm sure they had conversations with him, but it didn't really make sense, in my opinion, for them to bring Kirk Cousins back. They weren't really in that point where the rest of the team had them in a for sure winning window. You know, Kirk Cousins in his mid-30s now, he wanted to go to a different team that was going to allow them to win right away. And for the contracts that Cousins has signed over the last couple of years, those fully guaranteed deals, again, it wasn't going to give Minnesota the flexibility that they wanted for whoever that next quarterback is. They're sitting at number 11. They're not going to have a chance to pick a guy like Caleb Williams, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels if they stay at 11. They know that. They've known that for a while now. And so I've been eyeing that number 3 spot with the Patriots, the number 5 spot with the Los Angeles Chargers, maybe the number 4 spot with the Arizona Cardinals. Monty Austin-Fort showed last year he ain't afraid to wheel and deal and trade down a little bit. So to me, this ultimately from Minnesota was them saying, we're going to sweeten the pot for whoever wants us to trade up to them. You want multiple first-round picks? We got you now with multiple first-round picks. And so this is their way of saying, and I think boasting to these teams, we're going to be able to give you the best deal, because there's a couple of teams around them, the Denver Broncos, the Las Vegas Raiders, that also would love to trade up, I think. But now Minnesota's in a position where they can absolutely give one of those teams the best offer.
And I keep hearing that they like Drake May in Minnesota, but then J.J. McCarthy. So it feels like there's a consolation prize if that's true, that there's a consolation prize if they don't get one, then they'll get the other. What do you feel about those two guys, that they have to go up high to get J.J. McCarthy, maybe not as high to get Drake May?
Right. And it might be the other way around, right? We're hearing, okay, well, some teams have Drake May as QB2, some have JJ QB2, some have Jaden Daniels as QB2. And so what I love about what Minnesota is doing is they're giving themselves the flexibility to, sure, they'd like to get a deal done before draft weekend if they can get up to number 2 or number 3. I don't think they're going to be able to get up to 2. But if they can get up to 3, they'll do it before draft weekend. If not, they'll still be comfortable enough to say, all right, let's see how this plays out. Let's see which quarterbacks end up going 1, 2, 3, if we have 3 go off the board, and then we'll adjust how aggressive we want to get after that. The Sam Darnold signing, to me, is the underrated part of this, because I don't think Kevin O'Connell's lying when he says that he likes what he has seen from Sam Darnold. To me, they'd be comfortable putting him out there in week 1, where if you draft a J.J. McCarthy, you might think he's going to win a Super Bowl for you someday. That doesn't mean you think he's going to look great in week 1. So that puts a good situation in front of whoever they draft, whether it's May, whether it's Daniels, whether it's McCarthy. But I think this gives them a lot of flexibility to achieve something that they're really happy about on draft weekend.
I haven't heard about anybody and what it would cost to move up to number 1. Like Washington, do they really want Caleb Williams? Are they satisfied with Jaden Daniels? Do you have a chart at Pro Football Focus of if you're going up, this is what it's going to cost you?
Well, I think that we have the charts that we go by. And, if you go, all right, well, you're only moving down one spot, you're only moving from 1 to 2, you'd think to yourself, hey, a couple of day 2 picks could get it done, right? You sweeten the pot, and it's 2 second-round picks, a second rounder this year, a second rounder next year, just to move that one spot. But the problem is that you are bidding against these other teams. And the Falcons coming off the board at number 8 with them signing Kirk Cousins, I think is to Washington's advantage because there's only so far Chicago would want to move down, right? I don't think Chicago's sitting there like, yeah, we'll take a trade to move down to 11 and we're picking 9 and 11. That's not what this team is going to want to do. But the only other team I think that would really be a threat to Washington is maybe the Giants at number 6, if the Giants wanted to get extremely aggressive, but even they would have to offer a huge ransom to go all to convince Chicago to go from 1 to 6 and convince Chicago, honestly, to move out of number 1 for the second year in a row. I think that goes into it as well. So I think that some sort of package of a couple of day 2 selections, like a second round pick and a third round pick for Washington could get it done. But to be honest with you, Dan, I don't know, because Washington, I think, will do whatever it takes to make Chicago say no to them not getting up to number 1. Because people forget this, they think about Caleb Williams, think about Oklahoma, they think about USC. He played high school ball right outside of Washington, right? This is the hometown kid. This is the homecoming pick for them if they could get up to number 1. So whatever the pick value might be numerically or score-wise, I think Washington might even offer a little bit more than that to try to make this happen.
He's Trevor Sikkema, the Pro Football Focus lead draft analyst, who had a bad week this past week.
I heard you guys right before I came on, these teams that people aren't too jazzed about having good seasons. Titans are just, man, they're in a different type of area than I thought that they were going to be as a franchise. I didn't think that they were going to move on from Mike Vrabel. I wasn't sure if they were really going to move on from Derrick Henry. They end up doing both of those things. They let Henry walk, but they bring in Tony Pollard and they give him the 3-year deal. And Tony Pollard could be a good football player, but you drafted Tajay Spears last year and he looked pretty good. So I was kind of hoping that, hey, we'd see a little bit more of Tajay Spears. You wouldn't think that you needed to pay that sort of money to a running back. And so, you go out and you pay a lot of money for Calvin Ridley. And sure, now you've got a nice little trio to make sure that you're seeing what Will Levis can give you. I get it. I don't love the moves in totality with one another. And so Tennessee was a team where they had a lot of money to Calvin Ridley, a lot of money to Tony Pollard. I don't know how it really helps them in the short term. It feels like they're spending a lot of money, and sure, it might make the floor of the team better, but is it actually advancing what you're going to do to build the team moving forward? I guess time will tell, but that was one of the free agency moves. As I look at the list, I go, man, I think they spent a lot of money. I just don't know how much better this team got.
Chargers won 5 games last year. They bring in Jim Harbaugh, and they get rid of their best receivers, restructure some contracts. What do you make of what the Chargers are doing or need to do?
Yeah, I did not think that they were going to choose the edge rushers over Keenan Allen. I really didn't. When I was looking through what the Chargers could potentially do this offseason, the Mike Williams move kind of made sense. He's been injured over the last couple of years. They could save a lot of money by moving on from him. That was kind of an understood. I wondered if it was also going to be an understood with the Joey Bosa part of things, right? He's been hurt over the last couple of years, hasn't had the same type of juice, but they restructure him, bring him back. And I thought for sure out of any one of the 4, oh, of course they're going to keep Keenan Allen. He's a franchise legend. He's still got some juice left in the tank for Justin Herbert, but they end up moving on from him. And they're basically saying, hey, this is kind of what Jim Harbaugh did at Michigan, right? Remember, those early years that Harbaugh was there at Michigan, they weren't good. And he spent a ton of time recruiting those guys in the trenches. So now over the last 2 to 3 seasons, for Michigan, they've been one of the best offensive lines in the country, and they've had some of the craziest athletes on defense that we've seen come through the NFL draft, both at edge and on the interior. So from a Harbaugh perspective, maybe this wasn't as big as a surprise to us as it should have been, or the other way around, because he has just always really emphasized things in the trenches. I'm surprised Keenan Allen was kind of the casualty of that, but now we're sitting here, we've all talked about wide receiver for the Chargers, and maybe it still ends up being wide receiver for the Chargers in the first round, but I think this is now a prime candidate at number 5 to move back in the draft. And then also draft on the offensive line. I really think that that is the avenue that they're going, fortifying both trenches in this first year. Let's set up the identity, the core, the culture of what Harbaugh wants to build on this team moving forward.
If you were advising the Bears with the number one pick, you would say what?
uh Put the ticket in for Caleb Williams and don't think twice about it. I really think that that's absolutely the move that you should make. I've watched a lot of film on these guys over the course of this entire draft season, going back to this summer, and wire to wire, I've had Caleb Williams as my number one overall choice, even through those struggles in the middle of the season. And, it's something to look at the stats and the highlights and everything for these guys, but I don't think Caleb really gets the credit he deserves for being the type of processor that he is. People think about him in this USC offense. Oh, it's a Lincoln Riley system. It's a lot of gimmicky stuff that'll work in college. It won't work in the NFL. But when Caleb is asked to kind of do a traditional drop back, scan the field, go through some progressions, read a defense, he absolutely can do that. And I think that that's just an underrated part of his game now, because people just look at the out of structure stuff. He is good in structure. We just didn't see as much of it as we're going to see at the NFL level. So if I'm Chicago, yeah, I'm taking Caleb Williams, no question about it, and number one overall. I'd also think about keeping my foot on the gas with a potential receiver with that number 9 overall pick. They've got number 9, and I know they brought in Keenan Allen, they've got DJ Moore, but look, if you have the opportunity to package maybe a pick next year and one of those fourth-round picks this year, I know that doesn't leave you with a lot of picks, but if you can go up to number 5 and get a Romo Dunze, a Malik Neighbors, all of a sudden, that trio of wide receivers, the established offensive line that you have, the defense that you've totally revamped over the last 2 years, you throw in Caleb Williams, you throw in that running back room, all of a sudden, the Bears are a legitimate playoff team. I'm not saying that they would get there, but that then has to be the goal for the talent level that is on the team. So I don't hate that move either for them with number 9.
Good stuff, Trevor. Thanks for joining us. We hope to have you on leading up to the draft.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Anytime.
That's Trevor Sikkema. He works for Pro Football Focus. He's in charge of Pro Football Focus's big board.